Welcome to Bow Ties Are Sometimes Cool with myself, Ashley, and Ed. Hello, Ed.
Good evening, Ash.
And this evening we are joined by a very special guest, author Mr. James Sylvester. Hiya, James. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm even better now. I've been called very special. Thank you very much indeed.
I always like to give a good introduction. So tonight we want to talk to James about the books that he's already written, and a book that is due to be out very shortly, Temporal Log 3. So this evening, I am actually, because you probably will have noticed this, listeners, whenever we have a guest on the show, I kind of hand over to Ed to do the questioning, because Ed does have a bit of a track record and history in this. I think he's hosted a few panels at different conventions in the past. So I'm going to hand over to Ed because I know he's well prepared and he's got some questions here for you, James. They're all about you. Don't worry, you'll be fine. But it's just going to be an opportunity to talk to you about what you do, your work, and also a book that you've got coming up. So we'll leave it there. So to hand over to Ed. Ed, if you can give us a bio on James, and he will have a chat.
Growing up, James Sylvester fell in love with the Cold War thrillers of John le Carré and the dark world of Fleming's Bond. Combining this with a passion for the history and culture of Slovakia and the Czech Republic, born from studies of the 20th century political history, he wrote his debut thriller, Escapespedition, in 2015. A lifelong fan of film and often taking inspiration from admired actors, James based the character in the book on Czech-born actor Herbert Lom, shaping their development to speak in the famous performer's rich tones. James's Prague Thrillers series was completed with 2017's The Prague Ultimatum, with his love for Prague also reflected in an unofficial, unauthorised charity Doctor Who story, The Creature of Vengeance, featuring the Time Lord battling the infamous Golem. A passionate European and opponent of Brexit, James's third book, Blood, White and Blue, was written in part as a tribute to the EU citizens living in Britain and features a Czech spy, Lucy Musilova. Is that right?
That'll do.
Yeah. Press gangs the services of a country that hates her. The Lucy Musilova series continued with 2019, Sealed with a Death. So, James, really, you're going to start at the beginning. Tell us, or tell our listeners, a little bit about the Prague Thrillers.
Well, that's going back a bit now. I can't believe it's quite as long ago as it did. Basically, I started writing them because I hated the day job. It was one of those people have been saying to me for a long time, you should write books, you should do this and that, and you always put it off because you listen to you must have a steady career and you must do this and that. And eventually, after a really bad day at the office, I thought I'm going to write a book at last. I'd met my wife in Prague, as you just alluded to, so I spent a lot of time in that part of the world. I used to study it when I was at university, long time ago now, and it always struck me that there's not really been a focus on Prague as a city. It's been mentioned in a few spy thrillers, but it's not really had a real focus that I could remember at the time. So I thought I'm going to write a spy book based in Prague and around Prague. That's really what the bare bones of it came about. I'd grown a bit disillusioned with the spy genre, particularly in films. Everything was very gadget orientated. Everything was all very larger than life. So I wanted to write something a little bit more in the le Carré style of a dark, seedy world. It's not, you've not got spies who drive fancy cars. You've got some very damaged people who are pressed into doing jobs they're not really fond of, but do it because they're good at them. And doing that in the setting of what I think is probably one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
And what sort of, for our listeners, what period are they set in? Are they modern? Are they?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of both. There's the modern day thriller. So when the first one was written in 2015, it's set in 2015, but it does allude to historical events. So things like the Prague Spring and the Velvet Revolution. So there's a little bit of a kind of an alternate history feel to it, but they're present day thrillers starting its sequel a couple of years later. I feel awkward talking about it now because the second one was very much reflected in what's going on in the world now. Big tensions in Ukraine, a bit of disunity in Europe, Britain leaving through Brexit. So it feels strange to talk about it now, seeing what's going on in the world. But yeah, they are very much what I was trying to do was a modern day 60s style thriller. God knows whether I succeeded in that, but that's what I tried to do.
And then coming on to your second sort of series of books, the Lucy Musilova books, where did that idea come from?
Well, the publisher at the time had wanted me to do a third Prague Thrillers, which I was gearing up to do. And again, I'm going to sound like that character out of Life of Brian now, always talking about, this is my wife. I am Brian of Nazareth, and so is my wife. But my wife is an EU citizen from Slovakia. She works in the emergency services over here. And it was, I've told this story a couple of times. I was driving her and some colleagues home from the pub one night, and they were all in the back of the car, 3 sheets to the wind, and chatting about things. I was just listening in, laughing to myself, and it got quite philosophical about the problems they were facing. And Mirka turned to a colleague and said, "I don't mind." Words to the effect of, "I don't mind being assaulted in the job, because that's part of the job. That's what we're there for. I just wish I wasn't called a foreign while they were doing it." And it was all around the time of Brexit had happened. We had friends who are European, who were getting all sorts of abuse in the streets. Politically, the situation was getting more and more dreary by the day. So from that point of view, I thought, well, I'm a believer in that philosophy of whatever you do something. And I'm not a very good speaker, as you can tell by my constant stuttering so far this evening. But the only thing I even basically know how to do is write stories. So I thought, well, the book will become my something, and I will write something about the hostility Europeans were and are facing in the country at the time. Still within that spy genre, still with a connection to Prague. But yeah, I wanted someone who was in that position of being rejected by the country they had chosen to live in, but still going out and sweating blood to protect it.
This one of the characters in I've seen on the sort of synopsis of the Lucy Musilova book, named Hartnell.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Was that a deliberate sort of Doctor Who reference?
Oh yeah, I drop Doctor Who references into everything I've ever written. There's always Doctor Who character names. I even got a character in my first book. I called her Daleka. Not even a real name. I just thought, well, it's a Czech word. I'm going to call her Daleka. And no one cottoned on so far.
So you've written a short story, The Creature of Vengeance. Can you give me a little sort of overview of what that's about?
Yeah, and that was actually in the first Temporal Logbook. So that would have been 2013, 2014 when we were submitting for it. And it turns out that was the first thing I ever actually pitched a story for and was ever picked up for publication. So I do owe Bob and Pencil Tip, who publish these things, I owe them quite a debt of gratitude, because without having been picked up for that, I wouldn't ever have sent my work elsewhere. I wouldn't have then got picked up for my thriller work. So yeah, that was just an open submission. I picked it up on Twitter one day saying, we're looking for stories. We want to do a story for every Doctor. I pitched them a 10th Doctor story. And again, I was writing my first book at the time. So I just channeled into that, set it in Prague with the Golem. Most people are familiar with the Golem. It's an old Jewish legend of the rabbi in the excuse me, many centuries ago had formed this clay creature from the mud near the Vltava River to be the protector of its people. The Jewish people were being oppressed at the time, and it's gone into legend. So I wrote a story about that, and set in the Second World War. Essentially, Nazis were attempting to resurrect the Golem and use it for nefarious purposes. Nice short story, love doing it, bit of fun.
So the Temporal Logbook series, the one that's coming out soon, is the third in the series. Series of short stories, essays. You sort of alluded to their different Doctor and each story. Do they have a theme sort of connect? Is each Temporal Logbook thematically linked? The stories thematically linked, or is there a thread going through them all?
Well, this one we've done this slightly differently. The first two, they're both great collections, but they're just simply short stories or whatever the author wanted to write about. This time, being given the chance to edit it, I did want it to have a theme. I don't know if you remember it in the old days. Big Finish used to do hardcover, hardback books, short stories. What do they used to call them now? Short trips, yeah. And each one of them had a theme. And again, coincidentally, I had the Destination Prague one. which I loved. I've still got that somewhere, and I've seen what it goes for on eBay nowadays, so I might hang on to it for a while. But I like the idea of each story being loosely connected. So this one, with me editing it, I wanted it to be around the notion of changed lives, and focusing on that. Everybody who has some kind of connection with the doctor, anybody who encounters the doctor, their life will be changed in some way, not necessarily in a good way. So that's the theme around this latest collection. Hopefully that will work. We've got some great stories to tell in it, that's for sure.
Excellent. And the proceeds are going to a charity called Settle, which Ash alluded to earlier. Can you tell me about the charity and your involvement with it?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I will point out, because again, I wouldn't want to hijack your show with any political commentary, but they're a non-political independent charity who are focused on providing information, advice, and guidance for EU citizens who, in the aftermath of Brexit, things like the settled status applications that people had to apply for once the status arrangements changed following the withdrawal. Has caused a lot of issues for people. It's not a particularly reliable system. It's electronic only. It causes difficulty with things like bank applications, rent agreements, getting in and out of the country for holiday. And what is often, the kind of people who are often forgotten are either very young children in care who perhaps didn't have people to make this application for them, very old or vulnerable people in care homes. There's stories of a German national who taught in this country for 40 years, who had no idea this was something she had to do, and then suddenly found herself with the status changed. And these issues are more common than we'd like to think. With the situation in Ukraine, they're doing a lot of work as well with for Ukrainian refugees to try and give them some support. So obviously, for familial reasons, it's a topic close to my heart, and I'm again very grateful to Bob and Penciltip for letting me nominate this as a charity. All of the Temporal Logbooks, they're non-profit, so every book has a featured charity. In the past, there's been mental health and HIV charities, and yeah, as the editor this time, I was privileged enough to choose where it went.
Excellent. And when's it being released?
October 6th.
October the 6th.
October the 6th.
Is that an ebook only, or is it going to be a physical version as well?
It's at the moment, it's only going to be a physical version, so it'll be a paperback.
Only physical,
yeah. It'll be. I think I've sent you guys the proof copy, which is in
you have, yes.
But yeah, the ones for sale are going to be paperback, and they're through Lulu, so they're print to order site.
Fantastic. And if you could send myself or Ash the link, we'll put that on this episode, lovely. So our readers can buy that, and hopefully have a dash good read, and also support a very, very worthy charity as well.
Oh, bless you. Thank you, guys.
No problem.
To be honest, I actually, Ed will know I'm not necessarily prone to this, but I actually find that quite emotional, really. It's sort of heartbreaking, when you're pointing out actually about who this can help, children and things like that. You just, you take it for granted. Recently, I've met lots of various people just in the community through one, just not actually working with them, but just because you do, who come from Ukraine, and it does touch you, and I take for granted how simple our lives are, really. So yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to make sure we will tweet, obviously, about this particular show, but also we'll make sure that those links are put on our Twitter account as well to the charity.
Very grateful, guys. Thank you.
No problem at all. One last thing. Going back to your Lucy Mislova books, when's the next one out?
Oh, now you're asking. I've actually, I'm giving Lucy a little break for a moment. I'm doing an audio project, an audiobook project with an actor friend. I'm not allowed to say very much at the moment. Okay. So, I'm going to write a story which will be a little bit of a paranormal detective thing, so kind of a break in the genre, largely because the real world is so horrifyingly depressing at the moment. I didn't want to spend, invest my emotional energy in writing another dark, seedy thriller. So we're going to do this, and then my actor friend is going to voice record it and produce it. and we'll see about how we go about recording that. So yeah, Lucy will be back at some point, but she's having a little rest.
Very good. I'm going to hijack here a little bit, Ed. Sorry, apologies for this, but what I want to ask was about how you go about writing a story, because I suppose it is something that I've toyed with in the past. So how do you go about the creative process? Do you sort of do you map out characters, or do you got an idea and then just how you make it all fit together? Is there? I know everyone's going to be different, I guess, but how does it work for you?
They are. I generally start with the characters. So I'll want to write about particular individuals or composites of individuals, and then I'll fit a story around them. The first book I did, I wanted to write something set in Prague. I wanted to write a spy thriller, and the individual traits of the main character, I wanted to write that, and then the story itself took quite a while, a couple of years to shape that. That becomes quicker the more I do it. So nowadays I write stories quite a lot. I had to write a story for Temporal Logbook 3 because one of our writers had to drop out last minute. I wasn't planning to, because I thought it was rather unseemly to commission myself. But I had to write a quick replacement, and it did surprise me a bit how quickly I was able to do that. Hopefully it'll be okay. Who knows? But yeah, from a personal point of view, I generally start with a character and something I want to write about, and then fit a story around it. But as you say, everyone's different, and if you're thinking about it, give it a go. Give it a go, Ashley.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Now we've got, obviously you've touched upon sort of a couple of things really, well, inadvertently. Doctor Who, obviously, and so given the foundations of why we created this show in the first place, Bow Ties Are Sometimes Cool, it's about our love of James Bond and Doctor Who. So I couldn't have you on here without asking you these questions, really, but I think I'm going to know the answer. Who is your favourite James Bond?
I'm a Tim Dalton man.
Well, there we are. Yeah, that's Ed. Don't cry. Right. So,
it's one of those. There are no bad James Bonds. I love all of them. I love Roger. I love Sean. But again, it's a cliche these days, but I read the books. Tim, for me, feels like the Bond of the books. So I go for that.
Well, I would agree with you. I've not read. Sounds awful. I purport to be a Bond fan, but I've not read the books. But there is a reason for that. I'm just not very. I like to listen to things, but anyway, we won't go into all that. So,
but it's really valid. The cinematic Bond is a different character. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying I prefer Roger, Sean, Pierce, or whoever, or George. They're different beasts, and you can enjoy both. There's not a single Bond film. There's not a single Doctor Who story I would watch and hate. You're going to find something you enjoy in all of them.
So with that in mind, then, because Ed's nodding, that Ed, the anticipation, I can see it in his face.
Oh.
Who's your favourite Doctor Who?
Oh God.
Yeah.
I know. Now, I grew up in the 80s, so Peter, Colin, and Sylvester were my doctors growing up, and I've got a lot of affection for. Again, I love all of them. The one I'm probably most like is Peter Capaldi. I really do gravitate to Peter Capaldi. And recently, during lockdown, I did a whole rewatch of the third Doctor of the John Pertwee years, and I absolutely fell back in love with John Pertwee. So yeah, 3 is probably who I would like to be if I could be, flamboyant and man of action, and 12 is probably who I'm really close, like a grumpy loner.
Well, Ed, go on, sure, then, Ed. I know you said this before, but just in case,
it sort of slips back and forth between Sylvester McCoy and Peter Davison. At the moment, it's Peter Davison because I've just listened to Big Finish's 40 in total, and that is an absolute love letter to the Fifth Doctor, complete Fifth Doctor era. It's fantastic. So yeah, it's sort of Davison sort of by a fingernail ahead now, but tomorrow it might be McCoy again.
To be fair, I did see you today, Ed, though, in person, and you were wearing a jacket which put me in mind of John Pertwee for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh, my velvety sort of suede velvety jacket, yeah.
You just needed a frilly shirt, that was all.
Peter Davison t-shirt on underneath it, though.
Oh, we're Braveheart.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
it.
for me, Sylvester McCoy for me, but there we are. Although I like all of them really, but Sylvester McCoy was probably the one that I just remember the best. So we've kind of, thus far, directed the conversation and talked about your work. But obviously, we wanted to give you the platform to talk about whatever you wanted to in relation to your work, and I'm sure Temporal Log will come up again. So the floor is yours.
Well, really, I'm going to feel like I'm at an award ceremony now, and I'm going to take this opportunity just to say cheers to a lot of people regarding it, because, as I said, I do owe a debt to Bob and Pencil Tip, who are based in Canada, because without having been accepted onto Temporal Logbook #1, I wouldn't have had the grapes to go submitting my work anywhere else. So I really am grateful for those. My original publisher of my thriller stuff, Bain, sadly no longer around. They were a bit of a victim of the pandemic. As the business was, I should clarify. Unfortunately, a lot of indie publishers felt the pinch during that time. Matthew, who ran Bain, is now a literary agent. Very grateful to him too. Bloodhound are my publisher at the moment. Again, very happy to be with them. What I really would like to do and want to draw attention to is some of the stuff that Pencil Tip do, and then also the writers who've worked on this project, because I really am grateful to them for getting involved. Pencil Tip, a long-established Vancouver-based publication. They do a regular magazine called Hootopia. Lots of sci-fi and cult TV related books. Temporal Logbook is one. They have a long-running fan series of their own called the Doctor Who Project, which essentially carried from where the series ended in '89. They've just carried on writing their own stories and have their own history of how the show might have developed after that. That comes out quite regularly. They recently did Sarah Jane Adventures fan collection as well, and Sadie Miller provided a foreword for that one, who voices Sarah Jane now for Big Finish. They're toying with the idea of doing a Blake Seven one as well, so that might be fun to get involved with at some point. And they are re-releasing Grave Warnings, which is I think it's a 2-volume collection of original short horror stories. A lot of them in the M.R. James style, but quite mixed as well. So there's a lot there for people to get their teeth into. So I really would encourage you, if you're interested in that sort of thing, to check them out and have a look at their stuff. For anything that's official, it's going to be non-profit, so they're all there to support decent charities. So you will be getting some good stories, and you'll be supporting good causes as well, which is always a pleasure. What I'm really pleased about with Temporal Logbook 3 is I think we've got a really nice mix of established writers, professional writers, and some new people as well. This is the first thing that they've got on board with. I'd like to do that because I do like to bring new people along where we can. And if the story's good enough, then you welcome aboard. And fan fiction's a great way of getting your stuff out there. And something like Doctor Who, especially, because there's literally a multiverse of stories you can tell. And who cares about canon? You can go wherever you want with this stuff. So we've got Luke, who's written our 5th Doctor story. And that's quite an emotional punch, that one. I'm sure you'll enjoy it when you read it. This is the first thing he's ever written. You contrast that, we have Alison Winter, who's written for us, who now does an awful lot of work for Big Finish, and I'm absolutely over the moon that Alison is on board with us. Rob Nisbet has also written for Big Finish in the past. Russell McGee is a sound engineer at Big Finish. So we've got some people who are really heavily involved with this stuff. People like Matthew Cresswell, who writes a lot of fan fiction. I completely respectfully think of him as the Terrence Dicks of fan fiction. If you need a story reliably, Matthew will turn one out for you, and it'll be good. So I'm thrilled to have all of these people on board. It was a pleasure to work with them and to bring their stories along. And I must say as well, Yuji Yuji So played Chang Li in the 8th Doctor TV movie. has very kindly written a foreword for us. That's a real pleasure. We approached him. One of Hamish's story mentions Chang Li in it. I don't want to give too much away, spoiler-wise, but Chang Li is mentioned in that. So I shamelessly use that as a plug-in. So I'll just contact Eugene and see if he's up for to give us a forward. And the planets aligned, and he said yes, and he's been absolutely lovely about it. So. And I think that's a bit of a thrill for the writers as well to have. It's like a bit of official recognition from the show in a way. That you've got the voice of one of the stars backing you up. So it's been a great project to be involved in. We've talked about the charity, and don't want to keep beating that drum, but you'll get some good stories, and we'll be helping people as well at the same time.
Absolutely, I don't think you can beat that drum too much. It's all in a fantastic cause, genuinely, and I hope everyone checks it out who's listening to this. Well, James, you have survived the interrogation. Well done, well done. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening. Edward has done his good, questioning there. Good work, Edward. Good work.
Thank you very much, Ash.
You're very welcome. But it's been an absolute pleasure. We will obviously put out tweets about the book and the charity it's going to be supporting, because we think it's a fantastic cause. And I just want to say thank you very, very much for coming in and having a chat with us, James.
Oh, well, thank you very, very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, chaps. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's a goodbye from me and a goodbye from Ed.
Goodbye, everybody.
And I think a goodbye from James as well. I think he looks like he wants to say goodbye.
Yeah, why not? Bye-bye, everyone.
We've been Bow Ties Are Sometimes Cool. Please like and subscribe. Take care. Bye now.